Trump's agenda faces judicial roadblocks. Recent court decisions have become a formidable barrier to some of President Trump's most high-profile initiatives, highlighting the increasingly pivotal role of the federal judiciary in curbing his efforts to reshape the nation. The courts have emerged as a critical battleground, with a flurry of legal challenges earlier this year causing significant delays in Trump's second-term agenda. Judges have been scrutinizing cases, often on an emergency basis, ranging from the dismantling of federal agencies to targeting elite law firms. While Trump has secured some victories thanks to conservative majority rulings at the Supreme Court, many of these cases are still navigating the justice system, with final resolutions likely still far off. However, several high-profile rulings over the past few weeks have acted as a check on Trump's actions, especially as the Republican-controlled Congress has largely stepped back, allowing the president to govern with minimal interference. These cases illustrate the difference between the initial questions courts address and the more comprehensive questions they tackle once all arguments are presented, explains Steve Vladeck, CNN legal analyst and professor at Georgetown University Law Center. The government is losing many of these cases at this latter stage, at least in the lower courts, Vladeck adds. The big question is how these cases will fare at the Supreme Court. But one thing is certain, we'll find out sooner rather than later. Let's delve into some recent court rulings that have gone against Trump. The Alien Enemies Act backlash. In mid-March, Trump invoked the Alien Enemies Act 18th century wartime authority to expedite the deportation of alleged members of a Venezuelan gang. While he managed to remove over 100 migrants under this law, subsequent legal challenges brought by the American Civil Liberties Union, ACLU, on behalf of migrants have prevented further use of this act. The biggest setback came last Tuesday when the Fifth U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals ruled, in a divided decision, that Trump unlawfully invoked the 1798 law, which has only been used 3 times in U.S. history and only during declared wars, to target a foreign gang. This decision sets the stage for a likely showdown at the Supreme Court, which has yet to weigh in on whether Trump overstepped his authority by relying on this law as part of his expansive effort to rapidly deport migrants. The Fifth Circuit was the government's test case, and it has now forcefully rejected the administration's view that it could use wartime authority during peacetime, said LegalAlert, the ACLU's lead counsel in the lawsuit. The stakes could not be higher. Trump's tariffs face legal challenge. Last week, a federal appeals court in Washington, D.C. struck down many of Trump's historic tariffs, ruling that he unlawfully relied on emergency powers to impose these import taxes. The decision from the federal circuit has been one of the most closely watched this year, due to the tariffs' impact on global trade and their central role in the president's economic plan. The 7-4 decision stated that Congress, in passing the International Emergency Economic Powers Act that Trump used to set these levies, did not grant the president wide-ranging authority to impose tariffs. However, the tariffs remain in place for now, as the court delayed the implementation of its order until October. Trump has indicated that he will appeal this decision to the Supreme Court. National Guard deployment questioned. Trump's decision to send federalized members of California's National Guard and U.S. Marines to the Los Angeles area in June, in response to protests over his hard-lined immigration policies, was met with a swift legal challenge from Governor Gavin Newsom. While the case initially resulted in a favorable ruling for the Democratic governor, with U.S. District Judge Charles Breyer in San Francisco deciding that Trump unlawfully called up the guardsmen, a federal appeals court later reversed this ruling. On Tuesday, Breyer decided that Trump and Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth have been unlawfully using these troops to assist with domestic law enforcement activities in the L.A. area. Breyer, an appointee of former President Bill Clinton, stated that evidence showed Trump using the troops to set up protective perimeters, engage in crowd control, and demonstrate a military presence in and around Los Angeles. In short, defendants violated the Posse Comitatus Act, Breyer wrote, referring to a 19th century law prohibiting the use of troops for domestic law enforcement purposes. Trump has appealed Breyer's latest ruling, birthright citizenship battle. Trump's executive order seeking to end birthright citizenship has kept federal courts busy this year. In ruling after ruling, judges have rejected his controversial policy, deeming it unconstitutional and blocking it nationwide. However, in June, the Supreme Court, without addressing the legality of Trump's order, directed lower courts to reevaluate their nationwide injunctions to ensure they weren't overly broad. So far, courts have maintained their stance, or in some instances, issued new rulings keeping Trump's policy on hold across the country. Trump's order stated that the federal government would not issue documents recognizing United States citizenship to children born on American soil to parents who were in the country unlawfully or temporarily. The Justice Department signaled last month that it plans to bring one or more cases over the birthright citizenship policy back to the Supreme Court for a decision on its constitutionality. Challenging Maryland's judges. As courts have thwarted Trump's agenda, the president has increasingly attempted to challenge the federal judiciary's power more broadly. This endeavor was evident this summer when Trump sued Maryland's entire federal bench in an unprecedented lawsuit aimed at limiting court power in fast-moving immigration cases. The lawsuit targeted a rule implemented by the Chief Judge of the District Court of Maryland, which automatically and temporarily blocked the Trump administration from removing an immigration detainee if they had challenged their removal in court. However, a federal judge from Virginia, brought in to oversee the case, fully rejected Trump's move in late August, ruling that the government lacked the legal right to bring this challenge and that the Maryland judges are immune from such suits by the executive branch. Judge Thomas Cullen, a Trump appointee, included a scathing rebuke of the administration's rhetoric toward judges who rule against the government in his opinion. Although some tension between the coordinate branches of government is a hallmark of our constitutional system, this concerted effort by the executive to smear and impugn individual judges who rule against it is both unprecedented and unfortunate, the judge wrote. The administration is appealing Cullen's ruling. What do you think about these recent court rulings? Do you agree with the judge's decisions? Or do you believe Trump's actions were justified? Feel free to share your thoughts in the comments below.